I'm Paul Braren of TinkerTry.com. Tuesday, September 17th, 2013, I had a conversation with the technical director of Armari, Dan Goldsmith, who allowed me to record our technical conversation about new BrontaStor servers.
BrontaStor is kind of a spin-off, if you like, of a kind of UK company that's been going about 18 years. And we decided to kind of get into the storage business with some kind of NAS format enterprise servers. We realised one of the markets was kind of the kind of home server market, and certainly for kind of the IT professionals that have home labs. And we're hoping to bring these over to the US later this year. But kind of the key highlights is they've got all the server technologies in there. So we've got some Xeon E3 version, a Xeon E5 version. They've got all the server features of IPMI, single or dual redundant power. But they're also NAS format, so they're low noise. The Xeon E5 is actually liquid cooled as well. We've got at the moment got support for up to 32 gig, 10 drive bays, 2.5 and 3.5 inch bays, and 4 expansion slots.
Okay, Dan, you and I have a lot in common. That was a great brain dump. I talk the same way. Stream of consciousness there, and I caught a few nuggets that really resonate with me. One was, liquid cooling, so quiet. You're in your home right now. It's late at night. I see a machine over your shoulder. So give us a sense of your Nexus 7 that's able to move around the room. Oh, there you go.
Yes, sure. So this is actually a BrontaStor. I don't know if you can see that clearly.
Oh, it's pretty good. If you can hold it still a little bit, the fan is running, the lights are on, and it's quiet. Go ahead.
Yeah. So this is actually an air-cooled version. This has got a Haswell Xeon E3 V3 in it. It's got hardware RAID. So there's a hardware RAID module in there. This is just a development system, so it's only got 8 gigs of RAM in this one, just playing around with this one.
Okay.
It's got the LCD display on it.
Getting down just a little bit, sorry to interrupt. If you can just aim the camera down a bit, we're missing off the bottom. There we go, much better. Great, thank you.
Yeah. So it's, as I say, it's got eight bays which are connected to the RAID module. There's 2 bays which we kind of use for backup and stuff, which are connected to the chipset, and then there's 2 SSD bays that are in the back here, which I don't know how easy you can see those. Sorry. There's 2 SSD bays here, and there's the power supply there.
Okay. Dan, go ahead.
Yeah.
Earlier, you and I were talking and getting to know each other, and I mentioned, my own server history, and I work for IBM currently, and I gather you worked there in the past. You mentioned, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So we've both been in the hardware world for quite a while. And the other thing in that long sentence you started talking about was about power supplies.
The reason why we went the dual power supply in this is simply because the normally with redundant power supplies, they are just too noisy for any kind of server that's going to be anything other than in a server room. And Intel had created some power supplies for some of their entry-level servers that we found were not only with the gold and platinum efficiency, but they're also really, really quiet. And so we really like these. So we've kind of built those into our platform, so you can run single or dual power supplies in the system and still have them very, very quiet. So
if you could talk about a watt meter or whatever you guys use in UK to look at how many watts you're burning out of the wall, or IPMI or other out-of-band ways, but can you give us a sense of your models?
Yeah, the Haswell, both of these servers, well, I actually got a power meter on one of them. They're typically running, it depends on how much load obviously under, but the Xeon E5 system that I've got on the floor, which has got a 2670 8-core in it, 32 gigs of RAM.
Okay, I've clicked on technical specs so folks here can see what you're talking about. You said the M5. We're in the right-hand column here.
It's the M5. There's not a full technical spec on the BrontaStor website as yet, because we were just finalizing some features of that. You will actually notice on that one we've only listed a single 750 watt power supply. And there's a reason for that. It's because the E4 version, which is a Xeon E3, we have the dual redundant, but we've only got the single on the M5. Now, the M5 can run dual redundant power supplies, but because we're using an ASRock board in that, and it doesn't have the PM bus cable that goes from the power supply management controller to the motherboard. What that means is that if there's a power supply failure, the redundant power supply system still works, but it cannot talk back to the motherboard. So in fact, the system I've got here has got dual 750s in it, so that one is listed with a single, but it's just whether you actually want the kind of IPMI management of the power supplies. They do work in redundant mode. The E4 version has got an Intel Rainbow Pass server board in it, and that one does have dual power supplies with the management through the IPMI. So we kind of, that's again, E is the Enterprise 4 4th generation Haswell process. That's where the model name comes from.
Okay, so if we want to go bottom dollar in cost to leave it running 24/7, so we want maybe a single power supply or lower end unit, can you give us some sense of how many watts you'd be burning out of the wall? Say idle, so you leave VMware, ESXi, or Hyper-V running, but not doing much. What do you think we would expect for the watt burn?
100 watts is basically, in fact, it's almost exactly 100 watts. That's a 3.5 or 3.4, 3.5 gigahertz Haswell processor that's in that. That's a full wattage CPU. That's an 80 watt processor. And with a single power supply, Rainbow Pass motherboard, and I think, and 2.6. Oh, it's got a hardware RAID in there as well, so thankfully, if you can kind of, that is with the hardware RAID module installed. That's and a super. It sounds like a super cap actually. This is just an Intel hardware RAID LSI 2208 module with a gig of cache. So 101 watts actually is what it says at the wall. There's actually 2 SSDs and 4 hard drives in it, 6 hard drives in it as well, and it's still only 100 watts.
You chose an ASRock motherboard on one of your machines you were talking about. And we're both at at that home reasonable friendly 100 watt power range versus most servers that I brought home from work for 2, 3, 4 years ago. They're 400, 500, 600 watts of dual power supplies. Sure. So what you're showing us is a whole lot more appropriate with some real grunt, but also efficiency and low noise. Anything else you want to highlight about the difference in those 3 columns as I show the website that contrasts the 3 columns?
Well, I mean the S3 version, which it's kind of was originally the standard version, is actually an E5 V2. We're probably not going to bring that to market, even though it's listed on there. There doesn't seem much point. We've had that up and running now for about 4 or 5 months. Okay. And then when Haswell came out, there was no real difference in price between the board that's in that, which was an earlier Intel server board, and then the Haswell Rainbow Pass board. And the Rainbow Pass had all these additional features. So we kind of thought, well, there's not really any point in offering one without IPMI, one with IPMI. It's about another $20 or something different, so it didn't seem much point.
Okay, and on screen I'm showing that it's September 17th. You say September 18th. Are you ready to launch that middle one tomorrow?
Well, we were, so there's been a slight delay, but we think it's only going to be a couple of weeks. So, but we're launching it. As I say, in the UK, we're waiting for FCC Part 15 approval in a few weeks, and we'll then hopefully find a reseller over in the US and make it available in the States. And it should be available to buy just as a bare bones, so just a motherboard in a chassis, single power supply, and then people can go and buy their own RAM, CPU, drives, etc. and populate it. But again, there may be a reseller that wants to kind of sell it as a complete unit, so that's kind of yet to be determined. You
mentioned you had seen some of the articles I've written about the LSI 9265, but in general, just LSI family of drivers and getting MegaRAID to work inside of VM is of interest to you. And I'm looking at your product spec columns, and I see you do mention, LSI. So can you just tell me a little bit more about that? So in the higher end ones, you're going to ship it pre-configured with a RAID, and how will the user manage it?
There's the E4, for example, a standard. We offer two modules which are actually Intel modules that clip onto the front of the board, and the nice thing is that they don't kind of use the expansion slots. There is a limitation as to what the slot configuration is depending on which module is in there. So they have an LSI 2308, which is a PCI Gen 3 HBA module, and that's kind of really good if you want to kind of go crazy and fill it full of SSDs, because you've got the 8 gig per second bandwidth onto the board. If you're going to go with the hardware RAID, then there's an LSI 2208 with a gig of cache, and then we, as standard, ship that with the super capacitor battery backup, and we've got a special frame in our chassis, which is I'll just kind of show you there. So this metal bracket here holds the supercapacitor, and then obviously the RAID module there. If you want to put a standard RAID card in it, we've actually got a BBU mount on this side, so you can plug a standard RAID card into low profile into one of the slots, and actually a BBU or battery or capacitor can go in there. So we've accommodated both types of, or even if you want dual RAID cards, which I don't know whether anyone will do on a micro ATX board, but
can you aim down a little bit further down with the camera? That was excellent. We were just cropping off the bottom. A little further down. Keep going down, or tilting the camera down. We're just missing the bottom. The other way.
Okay. I mean, basically, there's some videos on the BrontaStor website.
Ah, yes. Point that out to me.
Which
Yep.
actually detail which goes through each of the 3 versions in detail, showing kind of detailed photographs inside and going through all the features.
Okay. From your main homepage, how do we find your videos? Walk me through.
Just the bottom right-hand side. Just click on the YouTube icon.
Okay, you've got a YouTube channel and you've got a bunch of pre-prepared videos. Excellent. Maybe as we wrap this up, you could just show me, or let's see, highlight what this does for the home enthusiast. People like me in the IT profession, I worked with a lot of Dell, HP, and IBM gear in my 2 decades or so. You probably have a similar background. So what's the take-home message, the advantage for the home enthusiast on this? Say, the busy dad or people that have other priorities in life.
I saw a lot of people. I mean, I have, I wanted a server that I could actually have at home, that I could kind of mess around on VMware. And that was kind of one of the driving things for this, that it would serve as a home server, it would allow me to mess around with VMware, and obviously have a decent processor support, lots of expansion slots. So, I've got my little kind of home office here. There's a Xeon E5 BrontaStor just under my table, which you can probably just see under there. Not really much to see there. But that's got the Xeon E5 8-core processor and 32 gig. It's running ESXi5. It's got a hardware RAID card, LSI Cascade. So there's 2 SSDs in RAID 0 that are caching the disk array. There's a 10 gig Ethernet card in it as well, connected up to my workstation. So I've got my dual Xeon workstation over here, which is just, and that's connected up to as well. So I can mess around with 10 gig and all that kind of stuff. And it's just whisper quiet, and it's in my home. It's just under my desk. I don't have to worry about it.
Excellent. Last piece would be your YouTube channel. Maybe it highlights the panel, but as we close out this video, if you could just give us one more maybe close-up of the panel. What are the blinky lights showing us?
Sure, yeah. So you can kind of just see.
You got the camera aimed down a little bit? Okay, there. Now we got it. Excellent.
Yeah. So in fact, there's
a sled.
So the drive trays in this. This is a kind of a prototype one, so this doesn't. But you can see that we've got cutouts for both 2.5 and 3.5 inch drives. So you can swap both drives across the whole system.
Yeah.
As I say, the LCD that's in there, we built that in specifically for OpenE. So OpenE will detect and drive that display automatically if you're going to run OpenE. But basically, normally the display isn't on that. There's individual security locks as well. So the RAID bay has got a set of security locks that locks all 8 drives. Then each of the backup drives, and these are what we would normally use for kind of backup, these have their own security locks, so you can kind of lock those down. Okay,
very nice. Right before I started recording, we did go back that in 2011, when I was starting down this road of a home build, trying Gigabyte, MSI, ASRock, and ASUS. Only 2 of those 4 worked with VM Direct Path. So what are your current plans? You're about to play with ESXi 5.5 and larger than 2 terabytes, I imagine, and you're probably also about to start toying with USB 3 or rated after pass-through, correct?
Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, I'm still running 5.0 at the moment because of the pass-through not working on 5.1.
Yeah, so I agree.
I haven't caught up with the 5.5. I wasn't even aware that was out yet.
Not quite yet. It's what? Okay. Stay tuned.
Right. Okay. So absolutely, yeah, I'll be switching across to that. But yeah, I mean, basically, pass-through. I've got pass-through configured on the Xeon E5 version, so that all my ports are wired through to different VMs. All the 2 USB hosts, the front ports and rear ports are all wired through, so to different VMs.
Okay, so you use that mostly as a speed experiment. You want to see how you do when you pass something through to a VM versus just letting VMware carve up whatever that is, whether it's
Yeah,
networking, a storage adapter, or USB 3.
yeah,
It's you
yeah.
horsing around, basically. Okay. Do you have a particular practical use case you're trying to get going that you're looking forward to trying again on 5.5 that broke on 5.1?
Um, I mean, the original reason was for the LCD displays. That if we're running running OpenE as a virtual machine, because we're running iSCSI volumes and stuff like that, then it was you can control OpenE through the display,
Okay.
and just the IP addresses and stuff like that, rather than just logging on. And obviously that bit just wasn't working at all with 5.1. So that's kind of a nice thing because that's a USB connected display.
Okay.
But yeah, it's really good to have USB storage and stuff like that just pass through to the VM sometimes.
Yep, with good speed. All right. And then finally, KVM over IP or virtual media over LAN, you also mentioned. So all the server vendors have this. You and I have been, doing this kind of stuff in the data center. Having it at
Yeah,
home could be particularly useful for, training videos, watching ESXi be installed and reboot, right?
sure.
So
Yeah.
you found that to be solid and good, and you're happy with it?
Yeah,
At least.
absolutely. So there's a tiny little chip here. I'll try and show you that again on the motherboard, which is this here. If you can see that, that's the RMM4 Lite, and it's a tiny little chip that goes onto the board. It costs about $30, and that enables the KVM over IP, which is actually the Intel IPMI gives you all the features, but it doesn't give you the KVM over IP unless you buy the little chip and it just plugs on. But it's a standard module that's available from any of the kind of Intel EPSD resellers and what have you. It's a standard Intel server component.
All right. Well, thank you again for doing this impromptu video. I know I kind of caught you off guard.
No problem at all. Thank you very much.
Good night.